Dr. Zelthan Vorthak stood outside Sunshine Preschool, his crystalline blue body shimmering in the morning sunlight. He was tall, about 7 feet, with a head that looked like it was made of living glass. Inside his transparent skull, thousands of tiny lights flickered and danced. These lights were his brain, and it was the smartest brain in the entire galaxy. He checked his watch. It was exactly 8:30 in the morning on planet Earth. Today was the day he would finally complete his study of primitive species education. He had been sent here by the Galactic Academy, the most important school in all the known worlds. They wanted him to watch how humans taught their young ones. Zelthan laughed quietly to himself. This job was almost insulting. He had 3 advanced degrees from universities on different planets. He spoke 47 languages, including the musical language of the singing crystals of Altair 7. He had written books about how different alien species learn things. Important people across the galaxy read his work and praised his brilliant mind. And now they wanted him to watch human babies play with blocks. He pulled out his electronic notepad and started typing his thoughts. Assignment: observe primitive Earth education system. Expected duration: 2 hours maximum. These creatures barely have proper brains. Their learning methods will be simple and boring. Zelthan had studied humans before, of course. They were interesting in some ways. They lived for such a short time, maybe 80 years if they were lucky. They only had one heart, which seemed very unsafe. They breathed oxygen through tiny holes in their faces instead of absorbing energy directly from starlight like his own species did. Most importantly, human brains were small and made of soft, squishy meat. Zelthan's brain was made of pure crystal that could process information at the speed of light. A human brain worked about as fast as an old, broken computer. He had read all the reports about human education. Human children went to schools where they sat in rows and listened to teachers talk. They memorized facts and took tests. Sometimes they read books with pictures. It was all very basic and predictable. On his home planet of Etherian Prime, children learned by connecting their minds directly to the Universal Knowledge Network. A young Etherian could download the complete history of mathematics in about 10 minutes. Human children, he had read, took 12 years just to learn basic addition and subtraction. Zelthan looked at the small building in front of him. It was painted bright yellow with red flowers planted outside. There was a playground with swings and slides. Everything looked tiny and simple, just like he expected. He walked to the front door and pressed the doorbell. A cheerful human woman opened the door. She had brown hair and was wearing a dress covered in pictures of cartoon animals. "You must be Dr. Vorthak," she said with a big smile. "I'm Mrs. Peterson, the teacher. We're so excited to have a real alien scientist visit our classroom." Zelthan nodded politely. "Thank you for allowing me to observe your educational methods. I promise not to interfere with your learning activities." Mrs. Peterson led him down a hallway covered with children's artwork. The drawings were messy and colorful. Most of them showed stick figures and houses that looked like squares with triangles on top. Zelthan shook his head. Even their art was primitive. "The children are just finishing breakfast," Mrs. Peterson explained. "Then we have circle time, free play, snack time, story time, art time, and outdoor play. It's going to be such a fun day." Zelthan typed more notes. Human education appears to consist mostly of eating and playing. No structured learning observed yet. They stopped outside a door marked Classroom 3B. Through the window, Zelthan could see small humans sitting at tiny tables. They were eating what looked like pieces of bread and drinking from colorful cups. Some of them were talking. Others were making faces at each other. One small human was trying to balance a piece of fruit on his nose. "Now the children are 4 years old," Mrs. Peterson said. "They're very curious and love to ask questions. Don't be surprised if they want to touch you or ask you about your planet." Zelthan felt very confident. He had answered questions from the smartest beings in the universe. How hard could it be to talk to human children? "I am prepared," he said. "I have extensive experience with developing minds across multiple species. These young humans should be quite manageable." Mrs. Peterson smiled. "Oh, I'm sure you'll do just fine. The children are really looking forward to meeting you." She opened the door, and 23 pairs of small human eyes turned to look at the tall, glowing alien who had just entered their world. Zelthan stepped into the classroom and immediately noticed that something was different from what he expected. The children were not sitting quietly in neat rows. They were not listening to a teacher explain simple facts. Instead, they were moving around, talking to each other, and doing things that made no logical sense. One small human was trying to eat his cup instead of drinking from it. Another was having what appeared to be a serious conversation with a stuffed animal. A third was building a tower out of breakfast foods while humming a song about purple elephants. Zelthan's crystal brain flickered with confusion. This was not the orderly, predictable educational environment he had read about in his research. "Children," Mrs. Peterson called out, "we have a very special visitor today. This is Dr. Vortak from outer space." All the children turned to stare at Zelthan. Their small faces showed no fear, only intense curiosity. Several of them started whispering to each other. One raised her hand. "Are you going to eat us?" she asked politely. Zelthan blinked his large silver eyes. No, I do not eat humans." "Good," the child said. "Because I taste yucky anyway." And that was the exact moment when Dr. Zelthan Vortak, the most brilliant mind in the galaxy, realized he might be in serious trouble. Mrs. Peterson clapped her hands twice. "Okay, children. Breakfast is over. Time for free play." Zelthan watched as 23 small humans jumped up from their tables and scattered around the room like tiny tornadoes. This was not what he expected at all. In all his research, he had read that human education involved sitting still and listening quietly. A boy with messy brown hair ran straight to Zelthan. He was holding a purple crayon in one hand and had purple marks all around his mouth. "Hi, alien man," the boy said cheerfully. "I'm Billy. Want to try some space food?" Before Zelthan could answer, Billy took a big bite of the purple crayon. He chewed it slowly like he was eating candy. "Billy, no," Mrs. Peterson called out. "Crayons are for coloring, not eating." "But it tastes like dragon berries from the Moon Kingdom," Billy explained, offering the crayon to Zelthan. "Here, try some. Are you a friendly alien or a mean one? Because only friendly aliens get to share my space food." Zelthan stared at the small human who was eating art supplies and talking about dragon berries that did not exist. His crystal brain started flickering faster. This was not normal behavior for any species he had studied. "I am friendly," Zelthan said slowly. "But I do not think you should eat that." "Why not?" Billy asked. "It's purple. Purple things are magic. Everyone knows that." Before Zelthan could explain that color had nothing to do with nutritional value, a girl with blonde pigtails tugged on his robe. "Excuse me, Mr. Alien," she said politely. "I'm Lucy. I need to tell you something very important." "What is it?" Zelthan asked, grateful to speak with what seemed like a more reasonable child. Lucy pointed at the floor. "We're walking on the sky right now." "I beg your pardon?" "The floor is actually the ceiling," Lucy explained with complete seriousness. "See, we're walking on the sky and the real floor is up there with all the lights. That's why my mommy always says, 'Reach for the stars,' but she points up at the floor ceiling." Zelthan looked up at the actual ceiling which had fluorescent lights, then back at Lucy. That is not how physics works." "What's physics?" Lucy asked. "Physics is the science of how things move and work in the universe," Zelthan explained. Lucy thought about this for a moment. "Well, your physics is wrong. We're definitely walking on sky. I can tell because my feet feel cloudy." Zelthan felt a small headache starting behind his crystal eyes. He had never experienced a headache before. His species did not get headaches. Yet somehow talking to Lucy was making his brain hurt. A voice from across the room caught his attention. "George says he wants to be orange today." Zelthan turned to see a boy sitting at an art table. The boy had finger paint smeared all over his hands, and somehow he had gotten orange paint in his left ear. He was talking to a small gray rock. "I am James," the boy said when he noticed Zelthan watching. "This is my pet rock, George. I'm painting his portrait, but he keeps changing his mind about what color he wants to be." "Rocks do not have minds," Zelthan said automatically. "They are simply collections of minerals." James looked shocked. "Of course rocks have minds. George tells me things all the time. He said you have a very shiny head and he likes it. Don't you talk to rocks?" "No, I do not talk to rocks because rocks cannot speak." "That's really sad," James said. "Rocks are great listeners. George knows all my secrets. Want to meet him?" James held up the small gray rock toward Zelthan. "George, this is the alien man. Alien man, this is George." Zelthan stared at the rock. It was definitely just a rock. It had no brain, no nervous system, no way to think or speak. Yet James was looking at him expectantly, as if waiting for Zelthan to have a conversation with a piece of stone. "Hello, George," Zelthan said weakly. George says hello back. James announced happily. "He also wants to know if you have any pet rocks on your planet." Before Zelthan could answer, 3 more children surrounded him. A girl named Emma was holding a broken toy car. A boy named Kevin had a stuffed elephant that was missing one ear. And another girl named Molly was carrying what appeared to be an empty shoebox. "Can you fix Mr. Zoom Zoom?" Emma asked, holding up the broken car. He crashed into the bookshelf during a very important race. What kind of race? Zelthan asked. He was racing against the invisible cars, Emma explained. They're much faster than regular cars because they don't have weight. Kevin stepped forward. Can you make Peanut's ear grow back? He held up the damaged elephant. He lost it in the Great Stuffed Animal War of Tuesday. There was a war on Tuesday? Zelthan asked. Oh yes, Kevin said seriously. The bears fought the elephants over who got to live in the toy castle. Peanut was very brave, but he lost his ears saving Princess Fluffy. Molly opened her empty shoebox. And this is my pet butterfly, Sparkles. She's invisible but she's very pretty. Want to see her do tricks? Zelthan looked into the empty box. There was nothing there. Absolutely nothing. Yet Molly was smiling like she was showing him the most amazing creature in the world. I do not see anything, Zelthan admitted. That's because you're not looking with your heart, Molly explained. Sparkles is shy around new people. But look. She moved the box around in the air. She's flying. All the other children gathered around to watch the invisible butterfly that did not exist fly around in patterns that made no sense. Wow. Billy said, taking another bite of his crayon. Sparkles is so pretty. She likes the color of your brain lights, Lucy added, pointing at Zelthan's crystal head. Zelthan felt his advanced mind starting to crack under the pressure of so much impossible logic. These small humans were speaking as if fantasy was reality, as if rocks could think and invisible creatures could fly. And the most terrifying part was that they all seemed to believe it completely. Mrs. Peterson rang a small bell, and all the children ran to sit in a circle on a colorful carpet. Zelthan followed slowly, his crystal brain still trying to process what he had just witnessed. Maybe circle time would be more normal. Maybe the children would sit quietly and learn actual facts. Everyone sit crisscross applesauce, Mrs. Peterson said cheerfully. We have our special visitor here, so let's ask him some questions. Zelthan sat down carefully in the circle. The children stared at him with bright, curious eyes. Finally, a girl with missing front teeth raised her hand. I'm Emma, she said. Why is the sky blue? Zelthan's crystal head lit up with relief. At last, a real scientific question. He could handle this easily. Excellent question, he began. The sky appears blue because of something called Rayleigh scattering. When sunlight enters Earth's atmosphere, it hits tiny particles in the air. Light is made of different colors like a rainbow. Blue light has a shorter wavelength than other colors, so it gets scattered more by these particles. That is why you see blue when you look up at the sky. The children stared at him quietly. Zelthan felt proud. He had given them a perfect scientific explanation. Then a boy named Jake raised his hand. But does the sky get sad when it's blue? Zelthan blinked his silver eyes. What do you mean? Well, Jake said thoughtfully, you said the sky is blue. Blue means sad, right? Like when people say they feel blue. So is that why the sky cries rain sometimes? Because it's sad and lonely up there? The sky does not have feelings, Zelthan explained carefully. It is not alive. It cannot be sad or happy. A girl named Molly gasped. That's the saddest thing ever. The poor sky must be so lonely with no friends. Actually, said a boy named David, I think clouds are the sky's friends. They visit sometimes and make fun shadow shapes on the ground. Like yesterday, I saw a cloud that looked like a dancing elephant. And rainbows, added Emma. Rainbows are like the sky's way of smiling after it finishes crying. Zelthan felt his headache getting worse. Rainbows are simply light being split into different colors by water droplets in the air. They are not smiles. How do you know? Asked Lucy. Have you ever asked a rainbow how it feels? Rainbows do not have feelings. Zelthan said, his voice getting higher. Everything has feelings, said Billy, who had somehow found another crayon to eat. My crayon told me it's happy to become part of me. We're friends now. A girl named Sophie raised her hand. I have a question about invisible friends. Invisible friends are not real, Zelthan said quickly, hoping to stop this conversation before it got worse. All the children looked shocked. Of course they're real, Sophie said. My invisible friend Moonbeam lives in a different dimension. She can only visit when the grown-ups aren't looking too hard. Yeah, agreed Kevin. My invisible friend Captain Zoom has a spaceship made of dreams. He takes me to visit the planet where all the lost socks go. That's so cool, said Emma. My invisible friend Princess Sparklewings lives in my toy castle. She's teaching me how to speak butterfly language. Zelthan's crystal brain was now flickering rapidly with stress. None of this is possible. Invisible friends do not exist. Socks do not have a planet. Butterflies do not have a language. The children all looked at him with deep pity. "That's really sad," whispered Molly. "No wonder grown-ups are always so grumpy. They can't see the fun things anymore." Mrs. Peterson announced snack time, and the children moved to their tables. Zelthan watched in horror as each child found a completely different way to eat the same simple crackers. Kevin had invented something he called cracker skiing. He was sliding cracker pieces across his plate while making whooshing sounds. "Look, the crackers are having a race down the mountain." A girl named Rachel was carefully building a tower out of her crackers. "This is Cracker Castle," she explained to anyone who would listen. "The round crackers are the royal family and the square crackers are the servants. They're having a meeting about whether to declare war on the Cheese Kingdom." Tommy was having an actual conversation with his crackers before eating each one. Zelthan listened in fascination and growing terror. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cracker," Tommy said to a small round cracker. "But I have to eat you now. Don't worry, you'll become part of me, so we'll always be together." He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, then said, "He says he's okay with it because he always wanted to help someone grow big and strong." Zelthan pulled out his notepad and started writing frantically. His scientific mind was desperate to document these impossible behaviors, but he could not find words to explain what he was seeing. A boy named Robert sat down next to Zelthan. "You look confused," Robert said kindly. "I am trying to understand how your minds work," Zelthan admitted. "That's easy," Robert said. "We think with our hearts and our imaginations and our tummies and sometimes our toes. Grown-ups only think with their heads, so they miss lots of important stuff." "What kind of important stuff?" "Like how colors have feelings and how numbers are friends with each other, and how every toy has a secret life when people aren't watching." Robert leaned closer. "Want to know a secret?" Zelthan nodded weakly. "My invisible friend Marcus is sitting right next to you," Robert whispered. "He says you're the first grown-up who's almost ready to see him. You just have to stop trying so hard to think with only your head." Zelthan looked to his left. There was nothing there. Just empty air. But somehow he could almost feel a presence, like someone was really sitting beside him. His crystal brain began making warning sounds that he had never heard before. After snack time, Mrs. Peterson announced that it was time for art. The children cheered and ran to tables covered with paper, paint, crayons, and brushes. Zelthan followed slowly, hoping that art time would be more predictable than everything else he had witnessed. He sat down at a table next to a girl named Sophie. She had curly red hair and was wearing a shirt with a picture of a smiling sun. Zelthan decided to show these young humans what real art looked like. He carefully took out his special drawing tools from his bag. These were precision instruments from his home planet, designed to create perfect geometric shapes. He began drawing his home nebula, using exact mathematical measurements to show the spiral arms and star formations. Each line was perfectly straight. Each curve followed precise formulas. Each star was positioned exactly where it should be according to the laws of physics. It was a masterpiece of scientific accuracy. Sophie watched him work for a few minutes, then started on her own picture. She grabbed several paintbrushes and began swirling colors across her paper in ways that made no sense at all. "What are you drawing?" Zelthan asked politely. "A rainbow having feelings about Tuesday," Sophie answered without looking up. Zelthan paused his precise work. "Rainbows do not have feelings. And Tuesday is just a day of the week." Sophie stopped painting and looked at him with those big, innocent eyes that he was beginning to fear. "Of course rainbows have feelings. Look." She held up her painting. It was a mess of swirling colors that seemed to move when Zelthan wasn't looking directly at them. The colors flowed into each other in impossible ways. Some parts looked happy, some looked sad, some looked excited, and some looked like they were thinking deep thoughts. "See," Sophie said. "The red is feeling brave today, and the yellow is giggly because it's Sunshine's birthday. The blue is a little worried about something, but the green is telling it everything will be okay. And purple is just happy to be here." Zelthan stared at the painting. His logical mind knew it was just random colors on paper. But somehow, when he looked at it, he could almost see what Sophie was talking about. The red did look brave. The yellow did seem giggly. "This is impossible," he whispered. "What's impossible?" Sophie asked. "Colors cannot have emotions. They are simply different wavelengths of light reflecting off surfaces." Sophie looked at him with the kind of deep sadness that only a small child can show. It was the look of someone who had just learned that the world was much sadder than they thought. "That's the saddest thing I ever heard," she said quietly. "No wonder grown-ups are so grumpy all the time. They forgot how to see colors being happy." Those words hit Zelthan like a meteor strike. If humans at age 4 could perceive emotional states in light spectrums, what other fundamental aspects of reality had his advanced civilization completely missed? His crystal brain began flickering with warning lights. Things got much worse during story time. Mrs. Peterson was reading a book about 3 little pigs and a wolf. It seemed like a simple story with a clear lesson about hard work and preparation. But then a boy named Peter raised his hand. "Why didn't the 3 little pigs just invite the wolf over for dinner?" Peter asked. He seemed really lonely. Maybe he was just knocking on doors because he wanted friends. "That's a good point," said a girl named Annie. "And maybe he was huffing and puffing because he was nervous about meeting new people. I do that too sometimes." "Plus," added Robert, "if they all became friends, the wolf could help them build an even better house. Wolves are really good at blowing air, so he could help cool them down on hot days." Zelthan watched in growing horror as the children completely rewrote the entire story. In their version, the wolf became the pig's best friend, and they all lived together in a wonderful house made of friendship and shared dreams. "But the wolf was trying to eat them," Zelthan said weakly. "Maybe he was just really hungry and didn't know how to ask for food politely," suggested Emma. "If someone taught him better manners, he would probably be very nice." Then Annie asked the question that would haunt Zelthan for the rest of his life. "Do you think numbers have feelings?" she asked suddenly. "Numbers are mathematical concepts," Zelthan replied automatically. "They do not have emotions." Annie tilted her head and looked thoughtful. "But 7 always looks sad to me. And 9 seems like it's worried about something all the time. 4 is really friendly, but 8 is kinda stuck up." That makes no sense," Zelthan stammered. "Sure it does," said Kevin. 2 is obviously in love with itself because it's the same thing twice. And 6 is upside down 9, so they're probably best friends who like to do handstands together. Zelthan felt something crack inside his crystal brain. He had spent centuries studying mathematics. He had written papers about number theory that were used across 12 different galaxies. But he had never once considered that numbers might have personalities. And now as he thought about it, 7 did look a little sad. And 9 did seem worried. By nap time, Zelthan was sitting in the corner of the classroom, rocking back and forth slightly. His crystal form was flickering with stress patterns that his species had never documented before. Mrs. Peterson approached him with a small juice box and a gentle smile. "Are you okay, Dr. Vorthak?" she asked kindly. "They're impossible," he whispered. "They see things that aren't there. They believe things that cannot be true. They make the impossible seem logical." Mrs. Peterson patted his shoulder gently, the way she might comfort a confused child. "They're just being 4 years old," she said. "At this age, the line between imagination and reality is very thin. It's actually quite beautiful." "Beautiful?" Zelthan looked up at her with wild, flickering eyes. "They've destroyed my understanding of physics, mathematics, and basic logic. They've weaponized innocence and curiosity." Mrs. Peterson handed him the juice box. "Maybe you should rest for a bit." Zelthan took the juice box with shaking hands and realized that somehow, it did make him feel a little better. Which terrified him even more. 6 months had passed since that terrible day at Sunshine Preschool. Dr. Zelthan Vorthak sat in a comfortable chair in the office of Dr. Mindera, the galaxy's best doctor for minds that had been damaged by impossible experiences. Dr. Mindera was a gentle alien with soft purple skin and 4 arms. Her office was painted in calm colors, and quiet music played in the background. She had been helping Zelthan try to fix his broken thoughts for 23 sessions. "Tell me about the numbers again," Dr. Mindera said softly, her voice like a warm blanket. Zelthan's crystal head was much dimmer than it used to be. The bright lights that once danced inside his brain now flickered weakly, like dying stars. "The small human named Annie asked me if numbers have feelings," he whispered. "I told her no, of course. Numbers are just mathematical ideas. They cannot feel happy or sad." Dr. Mindera nodded and wrote something on her notepad with one of her 4 hands. "But then," Zelthan continued, his voice getting smaller, "she looked at me with those big eyes and said, 7 looks sad though. And 9 is definitely worried about something. And now I cannot stop seeing it." "Seeing what?" Dr. Mindera asked gently. 7 does look sad," Zelthan said, his voice breaking. "It's bent over like it's carrying something heavy. And 9 looks like it's always looking over its shoulder, worried about what might happen next. How did a 4-year-old human see something that I missed in 3 centuries of studying mathematics?" Dr. Mindera made more notes. "And how does this make you feel?" "Stupid," Zelthan admitted. "Like everything I learned was wrong. Like my whole civilization is just babies compared to human children." Tell me about the rainbow incident, Dr. Mindera said. Zelthan closed his silver eyes. Sophie painted what she called a rainbow having feelings about Tuesday. It was just splashes of color on paper. Random marks. But when I looked at it, what did you see? I saw emotions I didn't even know existed. Colors that were happy to meet each other for the first time. Yellow that was giggling like sunshine. Blue that was worried but trying to be brave. Zelthan's voice cracked. I've spent 300 years studying light physics, Doctor. I've written books about electromagnetic radiation that are used in universities across 12 galaxies. But I never once thought that photons might be joyful. Dr. Mindera leaned forward. The children changed how you see reality. They destroyed how I see reality. Zelthan said, his crystal head flickering with distress. They made me realize that my advanced civilization might be like blind people trying to describe colors. We know how things work, but we never asked how things feel. About anything. Can you tell me about your report to the Galactic Academy? Dr. Mindera asked. Zelthan laughed, but it was not a happy sound. I was supposed to write a long report about primitive human education. Instead, I wrote one sentence. Which was, recommend immediate reclassification of humans from primitive to unknowably terrifying. Request reassignment to anything else. Literally anything. I'll take the sentient black holes. Dr. Mindera tried not to smile. And what did the Academy say? They called me 3 times to make sure I was not joking. When they realized I was serious, they quietly canceled the entire human education study program. Permanently. Zelthan shook his head. They also gave me a new job studying temporal paradoxes and collapsing stars. Much safer than human 4-year-olds. How are you sleeping? Dr. Mindera asked. Badly. I keep having dreams about invisible butterflies and rocks that give advice. Last night, I dreamed that the number 6 was teaching me how to do handstands with the number 9. Zelthan looked up at his doctor with tired eyes. The worst part is that in the dream it made perfect sense. Dr. Mindera set down her notepad. Zelthan, I want you to consider something. Maybe what happened to you was not a breakdown. Maybe it was a breakthrough. What do you mean? Those children showed you new ways of seeing the world. Yes, it was confusing and scary. But perhaps they were teaching you something important that your civilization has forgotten. Zelthan was quiet for a long moment. You think they were right? About numbers having feelings and rainbows being happy? I think they were right about looking at the world with wonder instead of just logic. Maybe both ways of thinking are important. But how can I be a scientist if I start believing that crayons taste like dragon berries and rocks can talk? Dr. Mindera smiled gently. You don't have to believe those things. But you could remember that the universe is more mysterious and beautiful than any of us understand. Even the smartest beings in the galaxy. Zelthan thought about this. The children did seem very happy. Yes, they did. And they were kind to me even when I told them their ideas were impossible. They were. Maybe. Zelthan said slowly, maybe there is something to learn from creatures who can see emotions in colors and friendship in numbers. Dr. Mindera nodded. That sounds like progress. As Zelthan left the office that day, he looked up at the sky. It was blue just like always. But for just a moment he could almost see what little Jake had meant about it looking sad. And strangely, that did not scare him as much as it used to. 3 months later, Dr. Zelthan Vortak published a new paper called The Emotional Mathematics of Wonder. What Human Children Can Teach Advanced Civilizations About Reality. It became the most downloaded research paper in galactic history. The Galactic Academy added a new warning to all their textbooks. Human juveniles possess reality-expanding capabilities that increase with decreased age. Approach with open mind. Logic alone may not be sufficient. And somewhere on Earth, at Sunshine Preschool, 23 4-year-olds continue to eat crayons, talk to rocks, and see emotions in rainbows, completely unaware that they had changed the understanding of an entire galaxy.